Hey everybody, I'm here today to do a little bit of a bookish chat, a little bit of a bookish update as we near the end of the year and get into what I consider to be like true reading season, which is winter. So yeah, I want to talk about a couple of books that I've read recently and really loved. I want to talk a little bit about where my reading currently is and then show off some new books that have come into my collection because I have managed recently to get quite a bit of new books. In fact, every book I'm going to show off, which is quite a few, I got free of charge, which is wonderful. And it is not often that you manage to get free books in this life, so celebrate the moments when they happen. So yeah, let's just jump into the thick of things. I want to talk about a couple of books that I've read lately and found to be absolutely splendid. And the first one of those is The New Life by Tom Crew. I'm going to be honest, I decided to pick up this book and read it because I read the novel The Emperor of Gladness by Ocean Vuong this year, and I thought it was absolutely god-awful. I thought it was an abomination of literature, and I cannot believe that so many people seem to love it. I'm just really, truly flabbergasted. And I saw that Tom Crew had written an absolutely scathing review of it in the London Review of Books, and frankly, it deserved all of the heat. And I loved Tom Cruise's review of that book so much that I decided to finally get around to reading his debut novel, The New Life, which came out a few years ago. And it is about two men, one of whom is named John Addington and the other is named Henry Ellis, who decide to write a book in the late 19th century in England, arguing in defense of homosexuality, arguing that it was something that people could not control, and that the laws persecuting homosexuals were discriminatory and wrong. A very bold book for the very homophobic Victorian England. And the kind of thrust of this book is that the publication of this defense of homosexuality is coinciding with the Oscar Wilde trial, and the two men get caught up in kind of legal problems because of this. The book is really mostly, though, about the kind of lead up and the actual writing of the book. And John Addington and Henry Ellis don't actually meet for the majority of the book. And so the way the book is structured is that you get a perspective chapter from John, and then you get a perspective chapter from Henry, and you oftentimes get some correspondence between the two men in between. And it is a deeply emotional, fascinating book. It's loosely based on real events. Two men, John Addington Symonds and Henry Ellis, really did write a book defending homosexuality. A lot of the bits about how that book coincides with the lead up to the Oscar Wilde trial are fully invented by Tom Crew. But, this was loosely based on real people, real events, and real situations. And it is a gut-wrenching book. So John is a gay man, and he's stuck in a loveless, sexless marriage with a woman. You feel absolutely devastated for her because of the life that she has had to live because of this marriage. And as he is wanting to publish this book, he's really threatening the reputation of his wife. He's threatening the reputation for his children. And you feel all the pressures of the Victorian society upon him. He also has a new lover when the book opens up, a young man that he's met who's of a much lower class named Frank. So he has that situation kind of going on. And then you have Henry, who he's really in a very interesting situation. Henry and his wife, Edith, are kind of like proto-bohemians in the Victorian era. They're very progressive. They write and campaign and work for an organization called The New Life, which promotes progressive ideals, kind of stepping away from the oppressive confines of Victorian society. Edith herself is a lesbian, and she has a lover. Henry and her do not have a sexual romantic marriage. Instead, they have a very what's the word I'm looking for? It's driven by companionship, but it's also driven by practical interests. to support each other. And their kind of relationship and stuff is kind of on a different level than sexual, but one that's still highly elevated in a relationship and a partnership that they care about, right? So that marriage is very interesting. And Henry himself is not homosexual, but he's very interested in sex from a kind of academic perspective, and because he himself has a sexual oddity. And so, yeah, I just absolutely loved learning about all of these characters. The writing in this book is extremely rich, extremely immersive. There's a quote on the front of the book from when the New Yorker reviewed it, which says that Crewe's prose accommodates everything from the lofty to the romantic and the shamelessly sexy. And I really agree with that quote, because what I loved about his writing is that it's very supple. It's able to take on so many different tones and registers, and it's just lovely. Tom Crewe kind of has a very Victorian sensibility in his writing that really lends itself to the time and place of this novel. And yeah, on top of it just being a deeply emotionally affecting work, there's also just stunningly beautiful lines littered throughout the book, in small moments, in big moments. This is just a description from Christmas Day, when Henry is on his way to Edith's house, because in their kind of very different marriage, they don't actually live together. And it just says, "It was like all the other days, cold and hard. The pavements were speckled with frost, and the trees had pulled on long gloves of silver. When passers-by greeted him, their breaths unfurled like scrolls." I mean, just such a richly packed little passage of imagery. I keep thinking about when passers-by greeted him, their breaths unfurled like scrolls. Just what a lovely little sentence. And yeah, the book is just lovely. The prose is lovely. And you feel, like I said, this a real oppressive Victorian society on the characters. Something that I saw Tom Crewe say in an interview is that he wanted the reader to feel like they didn't want John and Henry to publish this book. And there are times when you don't want them to publish this book because you don't want them to drag their families through the mud, so to speak. You don't want them to kind of ruin the lives that they've built for themselves. And he wants you, as the author, to kind of grapple with why you want them to stay in the closet. And yeah, I found that a very moving and powerful thing. I loved it. I really, really recommend it. The other book that I absolutely loved is The Children's Bach by Ellen Garner. And I am going to try my best to be economical with what I say about this book, because I could just spend so much time talking about all of the things that I think are brilliant about this novel. And really, there's just no point, because there's no easy way to describe what this book is doing, what the experience of reading this book is like. I think you just must read it for yourself. You must experience it for yourself. You must feel these sentences yourself. You must go through this process yourself to get why it is just such an electric, wonderful read. It is about a married couple named Dexter and Athena. They live in Melbourne. I believe it's set in the late 1970s, early 80s-ish. They live a very suburban life. They have two small boys, Billy and Arthur. Billy has some kind of mental disability. It is not fully described what his exact diagnosis is, but he's not verbal. He can't form words. He has this very lovely singing voice, but he can't really communicate. And loud noises and things like that are just really awful for him to hear. So yeah, they have these two children, one of whom requires an intensive amount of care. And their lives are really kind of upended when Dexter runs into an old friend of his named Elizabeth that he went to college with. And Elizabeth is living the exact opposite kind of life that Dexter is. She's rather bohemian. She's 38 years old, and she's just taken custody of her 17-year-old sister, because their mother has died. She lives in this basically abandoned warehouse. It's not even a proper apartment. She has this very rock and roll boyfriend who does a lot of drugs and sleeps around on her, and she sleeps around on him, and they just don't live a suburban life in any way, shape, or form. And their lives are kind of smashed together, and you kind of watch the consequences of this, especially as Athena, the wife of Dexter, gets sucked into the bohemian life in an affair with Philip. It is a wonderful novel. From a craft perspective, it's one of those books that you kind of sit back and you just wonder how in the hell she managed to pull it off. The book doesn't really have any one particular character of focus. It flits around from perspective, from one person to the next, to the next, to the next, many, many times across a page, across a single conversation. The whole experience of the book feels like this just powerful rush forward through these people's minds. All of the characters are deeply unlikable in many ways, and yet they are all quite sympathetic, and I really felt like I understood every single one of them. And Helen Garner's prose is just delightful. It's muscular. It's stripped back. It feels so efficient, and yet it has a tremendous amount of beauty. The things she notices about people are so incisive, so razor sharp, so focused. And they breathe so much life into this book, into the observations, into just everything. The book starts off with a description of a photograph that the family keeps in the house. And I just think it's a really lovely way to open the book, so I'm going to give you a little taste of what you might expect from the writing in this. It says, Dexter found in a magazine a photograph of the poet Tennyson, his wife and their 2 sons walking in the garden of their house on the Isle of Wight. To the modern eye it is a shocking picture. They are all, with the exception of the great man himself, bundled up in such enormous, incapacitating garments. Eye lines. Tennyson looks into the middle distance. His wife, holding his arm and standing very close to his side, gazes up into his face. One boy holds his father's hand and looks up at him. The other boy holds his mother's, and looks into the camera with a weak, rueful expression. Behind them, out of focus, twinkles the windy foliage of a great garden. Their shadows fall across the lawn. They have just taken a step. Tennyson's hands are large, square paws, held up awkwardly at stomach level. His wife's face is gaunt, and her eyes are set in deep sockets. It is a photo of a family. The wind puffs out the huge, stiff, curved sleeve of the woman's dress, and brushes back off his forehead the long hair of the father's boy, who is turned towards the drama of his parents' faces. Though he is holding his father's hand, he is separate from the group, and light shows between his tightly buttoned torso and his father's leg. Dexter stuck this picture up on the kitchen wall, between the stove and the bathroom door. It is torn and stained, and coated with a sheen of splattered cooking grease. It has been there a long time. It is always peeling off, swinging sideways, dangling by one corner. But always, before it quite falls off the wall, someone saves it. Someone sticks it back. Just a great scene to set this story about a family struggling to live up to their ideals, to stick together. It's absolutely wonderful. Something else that I found really interesting is that I'm currently reading Helen Garner's diaries, and this will kind of be a segue into the currently reading. But these diaries contain Helen Garner's entries from when she was writing the children's Bach. And it's a wonderful insight into the creative mind and what she was trying to grapple with in the book, and the things she was wanting to accomplish. And she attends a piano masterclass while she is in the process of editing the children's Bach. And it really influences what she wants to do. She says, "To Paul Crosley's piano masterclass at the Con, after 3 hours of intense concentration, I was completely exhausted. His teaching was very challenging. He was not a giver of praise or even of encouragement, except to one girl who played Ravel. Everyone else played Debussy. I loved the language he used, not only because it was clever and striking, but because it showed me that the way I have been trying to write about music is not, as I had feared, hopelessly romantic or amateurish. A furtive texture," he said, "a harmonic wash in the left hand. Then he clears the texture. Let the harmony settle again before we take off. Hover above what you're going to do." The concept of phrasing began to have meaning for me, not to mention texture. And now I know what the pedal is for, to avoid breaking the sound. And I love that last sentence because that is how I feel about the children's Bach. It never breaks the sound. It has this incredible momentum and an incredible melody to it that sweeps you up throughout the entire book, from sentence to sentence, from page to page, from character perspective to character perspective. It's electrifying and beautiful, and one of the best books I've ever read in my entire life. I have now read it twice fully, and I'm in the process of rereading it for a third time. And yeah, I will keep rereading it until I feel like I'm sick of it. So who knows when that will be. So yeah, the books I'm currently reading, like I said, my attention has been kind of split across a million different things. I am reading Helen Garner's diaries. They were published in one volume here in the States and in the United Kingdom as How to End a Story. And they have just won the Baillie Gifford Prize, which is a very prestigious prize for nonfiction. And I am very pleased that they've won because I have been utterly delighted reading these diary entries. Helen Garner is a prolific diarist. She has kept a diary for a very long time, and she learned to write by writing a diary. She kind of famously burned her very early diary entries, but she has kept the ones from 1978 onward, and these collected diaries are between 1978 and 1998. They detail her end of her second marriage, the man she was married to when she was writing the children's Bach. They detail her affair with the Australian writer Murray Bale, and then her subsequent marriage to Murray. And that's kind of where I'm at in this book right now, is that she's kind of having this affair with him. And he's a married man. And she's writing about all the kind of emotional conflicts that come with that. But the book is, it's a diary entry, so it's not this kind of, perfectly structured, constructed story, because nobody's life is. There's all sorts of lovely entries that are just the things she's observing throughout the day, the things that she finds funny. She finds meaning in the day-to-day. And I just love looking at how she sees the world. She has this no bullshit, totally honest attitude about everything, and it really encourages, I think, the reader to approach the world and yourself with a bit more honesty. That's something I really love about her, and her imagery is just fucking gorgeous. Even just in the little notes she makes to herself in her diaries, I'm just loving them. It's a beautiful, beautiful insight into her mind, and it's kind of nice to have. I had never read anybody's journals before, and I didn't really know what to expect out of reading somebody's journals, and I probably wouldn't have gravitated to reading journals before, had it not been for the fact that I really love Helen Garner. But now that I'm reading them, I think I've found what's going to be my new favorite form to read. I want to read everybody's journals. I'm such a nosy, curious person about people's day-to-day lives. That it's really fun just to read what somebody gets up to on a day-to-day basis. So yeah, I'm loving it. Another book that I'm currently reading is Ayobami Adebayo's A Spell of Good Things. So I had previously read her novel Stay With Me. Really, really enjoyed it. I've had this book on my shelves for a really long time now and haven't gotten around to it, so I've decided to finally give it a go, and I am really enjoying it. It's about two characters, one of whom is named, I want to make sure I'm saying this right, Wureola. She is a doctor in training. She's very busy. She comes from a very wealthy family, and she is dating a man who has just propose to her, but doesn't treat her right. And then you're also following a character named Eniola, who is the son of a former teacher, but his father lost his job. He's turned incredibly depressed. He's kind of quit being able to support the family financially in any way. They're extremely impoverished because of this, and he is in a lot of trouble at his school because his parents have not paid his school fees. And these two characters are kind of on a collision course right now, in terms of how I'm assuming their stories are going to get thrown together. The blurb promises that they're going to be thrown together because of something that happens with a local politician and some sudden violence. So yeah, Wariola's family is wealthy and quite politically connected. So these characters are probably going to come together because of something that happens with Nigeria's front politics. Really liking it so far. The characterization is very detailed. Her sense of setting a scene is really good. It's one of those books where I can like really envision like whatever party they're in or whatever room they're in. The flow of conversation is really lovely. She has a great ear for dialogue and the way that people talk to each other. I really like the characters' voices. They feel really fully realized and fully lived in. It's a very slow-moving book, so to be honest, not a ton plot-wise has happened, but I'm just really enjoying the ride. I will say it's one of those books that while I'm reading it, I find myself really enjoying it, but I don't necessarily feel massively drawn to keep returning to it and picking it up. And I'm not quite sure why that is, but maybe that will change as things go on. I am also reading Shaman's Crossing by Robin Hobb, which is the first book in her Soldier Son trilogy. I have read this entire trilogy before. It is my favorite Robin Hobb trilogy, and Robin Hobb is my favorite fantasy author, so I am really loving this reread. It is going a little bit more slowly than I remember it feeling on the first read, but that's fine. Robin Hobb is a very carefully paced author. I don't mind that her books are slow. I really love her characters. I really love her storytelling. I'm really enjoying myself. If you don't know what this book is about, it is kind of set in a world that feels a bit like a Western and a medieval fantasy storytelling setting, traditional, have kind of like smashed together and had a baby. And you're following a young man named Navarre, who is the soldier son for his family. So he's the son who is to be raised to be a soldier and a captain in the king's military. He lives in a world where there has been a lot of conquest by his people against native tribes, in a way that feels very reminiscent of U.S. colonialism and North American colonialism against native tribes. And yeah, he becomes kind of enmeshed with the native peoples of his world when he is magically marked by them as a young man on a training mission, so that he kind of has this identity in the back of his mind, this other consciousness that is connected to these people. And you watch how his loyalty to his family is tested by his loyalty to this other consciousness in his mind. It's a lot more complicated than that, but that's kind of the essential character conflict at the heart of these books. And yeah, I'm really enjoying the book so far, about 2/3 of the way through it now. And yeah, it's a great time. Another book that I'm reading rather slowly is A People's History of the United States by Howard Zinn, a book which has been on my TBR for an embarrassingly long time. It is a very big, dense, thick history book about a history of the United States, told from the perspective of oppressed peoples, starting from when Christopher Columbus landed on the continent, through, I believe, this edition is through like 9/11 and the early Bush years. Howard Zinn is not the most exciting or compelling writer on a sentence-by-sentence level. I'm taking this very, very slowly. I'm more interested in it as like a stepping off point for me to learn about topics and things about American history that I was unaware of and that I might want to look further into. I've been kind of on an American history kick lately. Me and my partner have been watching the new Ken Burns documentary about the American Revolution, and it is densely packed and thick with historical detail. Some of the battle stuff, I really feel my brain just kind of zoning out when they talk about. But the larger, like, social and political things that they're talking about, I find very fascinating. And I find that type of thing fascinating in this book as well. So I'm enjoying it, even though it's rather thick and long. All right, now we're on to the shameful part of the video, which is showing off all of the books I have gotten recently. So my work has been really, really busy lately, and that has a lot of downsides in terms of the amount of free time that I have to actually read. However, the one upside that it has is that my work has a recognition program where people, if you like do them a favor or, done something helpful to them, people can reach out and like thank you for going above and beyond whatever duty it was. And you accumulate points, and then you can turn in those points for like gifts of monetary value. So I'm well aware of that. The whole thing I'm describing right now is like very privileged. Yeah, and because my job has just been so incredibly busy lately, I've been having to do a bunch of favors for people and stuff like that, and that means that I've accrued a lot of these points, and I trade them in for Barnes & Noble gift cards, and I have managed to get a shitload of free books at Barnes & Noble. So yeah, I'm just going to show those off now, because it is exciting to get free books. It doesn't happen every day, and eventually my lab is not going to be as busy as it is, and I'll get less points. So yeah. Celebrate while you can, I picked up some Margaret Atwood books, and that's because I have loved every single Margaret Atwood novel that I have read, even though I have not read very many of her books, and I have a shameful amount of her backlist to still get to. So I picked up Cat's Eye. No, that's the wrong one. I picked up Cat's Eye by Margaret Atwood. I used to own this book in a different edition, and I shamefully lost it somehow when I was moving, and so yeah, I got a new one, and then I also picked up Lady Oracle. I don't really know a ton about what either of these books are about, but I'm just excited to get to more Margaret Atwood. I picked up A Psalm for the Wild Built. This is the first book in, I believe it's called the Monk and Robot series of novellas. I am not usually a big fan of these Tor.com novellas. I find a lot of them to be thin. I mean, all novellas are thin, but I guess I mean substantively and character-wise rather thin. So yeah, I used to really swear off reading these books because I had went through a period where I read a lot of the Tor.com novellas and really didn't enjoy any of them. However, I really do like Becky Chambers. Her writing does something for me. I do find the optimistic view she has of the future to be endearing. And what can I say? She writes pretty decent books. So yeah, picked up this one. We will see what I think. I have read all of her other novels, I believe, except for this series. So it would be nice to complete out my Becky Chambers reading. I picked up The Four Spent the Day Together by Chris Kraus, a very famous author of I Love Dick. I don't really know much about this book except for the fact that it is about a real crime that was committed in which 4 teenagers murdered a man that they had spent the day with. This crime was something that happened in Chris Kraus's community, I believe in the Dakotas, if I remember correctly. And she writes about this crime, and she also kind of blends it with her own memoir of her life as a young person, even though it's more of an autofiction than true memoir. That is at least my understanding of this book. I listened to a lot of interviews with Chris Kraus, and yeah, all of it sounded really interesting, and so I decided I wanted to pick this one up. I also picked up The House on Via Gemino by Domenico Starnone. I read the novel Ties by this author a long time ago. I barely remember what that book was about, but I do remember absolutely loving the experience of reading it. And so I wanted to pick this one up, which I believe is the book that he considers to be like his best book and the one that he is like the most proud of. I don't know where I heard that now. Maybe I'm misquoting, but yeah, I wanted to give his latest one a go. I'm pretty sure this was short. Yes, it was. It was shortlisted for the International Booker Prize last year. So yeah. Also, Domenico Starnone is the husband of one Madame Elena Ferrante. in case you were unaware. And then I also picked up some short story anthologies. I love short stories. I might start making videos where I talk about and like wrap up my favorite short stories, because I don't tend to read a ton of short story collections anymore. I tend to just kind of pick up short stories here and there from different like anthologies or magazines, etc. So yeah, picked up the O. Henry Prize. The O. Henry Prize winners, which was picked out this year by Edward Jones and anthologized in this bad boy. And then I also picked up the Best American Short Stories this year, edited by Celeste Ng. Been making my way through, enjoying some of them, not enjoying some of them. So yeah, like all kind of short story anthologies, it's a little bit of a mixed bag, but I still enjoy swimming through all the short fiction. Then I picked up some memoirs and nonfiction. So I picked up Still Life at 80 by Abigail Thomas. To be honest, I had not really heard about this book at all, or Abigail Thomas as a writer, but I saw that this was a memoir about aging. And to be honest, I've become really incredibly fascinated and interested in aging lately, and kind of wanting to understand like what happens as we grow older and what to expect out of life. And, my parents are getting older, and that's been an experience that I was not expecting to hit me as much as it has, right? And so, yeah, I just find the whole ideas about aging interesting now. And I read the first couple of vignettes in this memoir when I was at the bookstore, and really fucking loved them. So, yeah, I will let you know what I think once I actually get around to it, but promising stuff. I also picked up the very famous memoir, The Liars Club by Mary Karr. Have not read any Mary Karr before, but I have always wanted to read her memoirs, so I am excited to get to this one. I feel like when it comes to like where to start with Mary Karr, this seems like the most appropriate choice, so I picked it up, and I'm excited. Then I also picked up A Marriage at Sea, which is subtitled A True Story of Love, Obsession, and Shipwreck by Sophie Elmhurst, and this is about a married couple who, I believe in the 1970s, set sail from England to New Zealand to kind of start a life of adventure. I don't think they were very prepared for the trip, from my understanding. They don't think they even had like a radio transmitter, and 300 miles from their destination, their ship or boat capsized when a whale breached. And they ended up surviving for like 3 months on a raft. And this book tells their story, and it also is a story about their marriage and their relationship on this raft. And I have heard nothing but rave things about this book. And maybe that is because I listen to a lot of the New York Times book review podcast. But they have talked about that book a lot on that podcast this year. It has been listed as one of the top 10 books for the New York Times. And yeah, every time I hear it talked about, I just think that sounds really freaking amazing, and I wanted to read it. And then I picked up some classics. So I picked up James Baldwin's If Beale Street Could Talk, which is a novel about a young black couple in the 1960s or maybe 1950s, I can't remember, when the husband is falsely accused of rape. And I saw the movie for this book a few years ago and really loved it, and I wanted to get around to reading some more James Baldwin, so it seemed like the natural choice. I picked up Stoner by John Williams. I wanted to read this book and have for a long time, and just haven't gotten around to it. And then when Jen Campbell read the Booker Prize this year, she mentioned that Flesh reminded her of Stoner by John Williams, which I don't think that Jen meant as a compliment. However, I really loved Flesh, and I thought if it reminded her of Stoner, I want to read Stoner, so I picked it up. And then I also picked up Charlotte Bronte's Jane Eyre, because it is a classic that I shamefully have not read and would like to get around to. So yeah, those are all of the books that I got for free. Joy to the world. So yeah, that's kind of where the reading is, where the reading was, and where the reading might soon be. I would love to hear from you guys if you have read any of these books, about how your reading is going and what your plans are for the end of the year. Originally, I had told myself that I wanted to prioritize rereading in the final month of the year, and I was planning this kind of grand, I'm going to only do rereads in the month of December. I don't know if I'm really feeling only doing rereads during the month of December, but I would like to squeeze a few rereads in. So yeah, that's kind of my plan for the end of the year. I will chat to you soon, I am sure, and I hope you guys are doing wonderful.